Okay, so this is part 3 of my walkthrough of my Hex Flower Cookbook. It's basically a discussion of the sort of things I've learned about Hex Flower game engines. Parts 1 and 2 covered some of the anatomy of a Hex Flower game engine, and the first example, which was what I'm calling the infinite game, where you just want to generate endless results that relate to each other, such that if you want to do terrain, you would sort of move from low-lying terrain up through sort of maybe hills and then to mountains. So you get a sort of continuous result. And this is why sometimes I call it a random table with a memory, because um, the, the next result is directly affected by the result you're currently generated. So in a typical random table, that doesn't happen. If you roll up one kind of terrain on a normal random table, then the next bit of terrain could be anything. You go from plains, mountains. But the idea here is you can't really go from plains to mountains without passing through hills. So in the last episode, I briefly touched on the probability distribution of this typical navigation hex, and how it tends to go down and across. And just to mix it up, I introduced these edge rules, which means that if the navigation hex, if you rolled an 8 or a 9, it would indicate, and you were here, it would mean that you'd come off this hex. But the rule I came up with is that you wrap around to the opposite end of the column or row that you're in. If you go off here, you'd come down here. The only exception to that is that in a lot of these game engines, I put in specific rules to stop non-intuitive results. So if you were in this square here and you rolled a 6, you would theoretically go down, you go from plains to mountains. And I want to block that off because that's a result that kind of defeats the point of the hex flower. But for example, you might go from here, from plains to trees, forest, whatever you want to do. Okay, so here's an example of a infinite, if you like, infinite hex flower game engine. So this is a weather. So you can see you've got kind of cloudyish weather and sunnyish weather over here, and then extreme weather at the top. And here we go. This is sort of, if you like, a walkthrough. So this sets up the events, if you like, and this is the rules, the navigation hex. Let's pretend we started on day 1 here. The first roll we made was a 6. You go down to here. That's day 1. And then maybe day 2, you generate the next weather, and you roll a 3, so you end up here. And then you roll a 7, so you go to there. You roll another 7, so you go off the hex flower, you end up here. Roll a 5, you go down here. Another 7, and then maybe a 10. So as you can see, in this example of the weather hex flower game engine, the weather generally has moved from a sort of a sunnyish kind of bit of weather to rain, just cloudy, and a thunderstorm, some even more heavy rain, some other rain, and then it finally breaks and starts to get brighter again. So you can see how something like this, you can generate a sort of series of bits of weather that make more sense than you would otherwise have in a sort of conventional random table generating weather. And it's pretty much the same. Now, pretty much I combine that weather hex flower with a terrain hex flower, and you can get sort of weather and terrain being generated. So you'd have one here and here. And I have a thing on drive-through called In the Heart of the Unknown, where you have 3 hex flowers, one that generates weather, one that generates terrain, and one that generates, if you like, encounters and things like that. Okay, and here you go. This thing here is giving you a hint about the basic trend. The basic trend is kind of cloudyish sunshine. Occasionally you'll get hot weather, occasionally you'll get sort of wet weather, and very rarely you get an extreme event. But you cannot go from here straight to a cyclone or tsunami or whatever the extreme event might be that you might have to make up. Okay, I think I'll cover the next bit in the next episode. But let's just take a little bit closer look at this, just to see. So yeah, if you were say start on, I mean, you could start wherever you like, depending on what weather you're experiencing in. So you're traveling and you want to start in sunny weather. Now, of course, if this is winter, you might want to convert this to say hail or snow, etc.